It is really good to be here with you guys. I should probably say you all, shouldn't I? It is good to be here with you all. We don't get to say that. What the heck was that? It's not you alls? All right, I'll go back. It's good to be here with you guys. That's how we say it in Chicago. Chicago, all right? And if you're like me, it's really good to be here with a group of people that are, just totally fired up about the mission of Jesus. You can almost kind of feel kind of the electricity. And one of the things that's kind of a struggle, though, for some of us is, while we're fired up about it, how do we get the people that we're leading and the people maybe back home, maybe some of the people around, how do we get them fired up about it? And I've been kind of thinking about this. How do we get those unmotivated people motivated? The last few months, I've had the opportunity to travel some into Europe and to Australia, where there's places there where they've done a lot more thinking and put in a lot more practice in missional engagement than we have. And one particular church in Newcastle, Australia, a little church there, just so impressed me. Just a small little church, but on that church staff, they have two different people on staff that are chefs. Chefs. And they prepare 800 meals every week for the homeless people in their community. There was a whole handful of things that they were doing for missional engagement. One of the things that was also fascinating, Sunday morning they had their service, but then they actually dismissed the service early because there was actually a party going on, a big city fest going on downtown, and the pastor wanted to make sure that everybody got to the city fest. That same weekend, they also announced one other thing, and I think this might be the key for getting our unmotivated people motivated about missional communities. They had these signs all over, and they were actually starting this. Pub church in the living room. I love the tagline. 2 beer service every Sunday, 6 p.m. to... Look at that. We got motivation right there. How about it? More beer, more deeper teaching. I don't know, something like that. One of the things I did find, though, while I was in Europe and while I was in Australia, you could feel kind of this missional kind of heartbeat, this missional impulse that's growing. And I truly sense the exact same thing is in this place. And I'm starting to feel that same kind of heartbeat, okay, in Chicago. A few months ago, a single mom, Kathy, cornered me in our cafe at our Yellow Box location, and she said this to me. She said, "Dave, I'm not sure I can get them to come to church with me." Now, I was surprised to hear Kathy say that, because on any given weekend, I can look out there, and she'll sit somewhere over here, and she'll have a whole row full of people that will be with her who are people who are not Christians, who are far from God. She is as passionate about helping people find their way back to God. That's how we talk about it, as I am. But then she began to describe to me these teenage girls that are in an eating disorder group that she was leading. And she said, "I'm not sure I can get them to come to church with me." She said, "In fact, I've tried so hard. I've got them to come. They would actually come in. They would come into our lobby, our cafe area, but it was so intimidating for them to come into the big room, okay? And our church isn't nearly this size, okay, the auditorium. But it was so intimidating for them to come into the big room, like that was several hundred people, that the best they can do is just kind of get into the cafe area." And then she asked me this: could we start something for people who won't come to church? I knew the answer had to be yes. A couple weeks ago, through Facebook, I got this message. Okay, I got this message from one of our young adults, and I want to just read it to you. And I got a little excerpt from it on the screen. And the message was someone, she just recently became a Christ follower, and she wrote this to me. She said, "Dave, just a crazy idea." Now, keep in mind, she's never read Alan Hirsch. She doesn't have any clue who Neil Cole is. If we said Verge, she would think it was like iTunes' New Music Tuesday group or something. And she's got all kinds of hang-ups that she's got to get worked through. And here's what she said to me. She said, "Dave, just a crazy idea, but wouldn't it be cool if there could be a church in just random places that wouldn't be the places you thought of as traditional places to worship, like bars and beaches, places that non-believers frequent a little more, where they feel a little more comfortable?" Then she adds, "Crazy thought, I know, but you wouldn't believe how lonely people are in some of those places." Then she adds, "Well, maybe it's something just to pray about. Thanks." This winter, I had about 12 different dinners. We were going through a fundraising effort for a couple initiatives, a local initiative and a kind of a global initiative that we were doing. And I sat across from some of our most affluent and generous people and asked them for big dollar amounts. And as I asked them for, it was significant dollars, the conversation turned. They came back and said, you know what, count me in. We're good for the money. But almost to a person, these successful business leaders would look at me and say this, Dave, I'm good with the money, but it just seems like there's something more that I should be doing. And I'm telling you, you can feel that impulse of the Holy Spirit in this single mom and this young adult, this craving inside, this apostolic genius that's planted inside of us from the Holy Spirit that's just dying to be unleashed. And as lovers of God and as followers of Jesus, this shouldn't be surprising. We've always been a going and sending people. You need to spend time in these verses, but real quick, in Genesis 12, God tells his people, leave the country, go to a land I'll show you. In John 3, God says, no, I'm sending my son. In Luke 10, Jesus says, okay, 2 by 2, you guys go out. Go, I'm sending you. And so over and over again, God's own impulse to the lost, the lonely, and the least is to go and descend. And so when Jesus says, go and make disciples of all nations, it shouldn't be surprising. It was nothing new. And I think what's happening here in this room, there's something inside all of us and inside a lot of the people that we're in community with that says, you know what? We have to get beyond the walls of our facility. It's unrealistic to expect just to bring people in. And the way we're going to do it, and that's kind of our theme for this first session, a big part of it is establishing apostolic cultures or entrepreneurial environments, whatever you're comfortable with, going in and sending. How do we do that? Let me give you a few things. We'll see how far we can get through this, okay? Here we go. Number one, how do you foster an apostolic environment? I feel like maybe that's perhaps a gift that God's given me, this gift of apostleship. And so here's some of the things I've tried to do, both in the church that I lead, but also in the network that we're also leading called New Thing. Number one, I would challenge you to do this. Ordain every Christ follower. Ordain every Christ follower. About 12 weeks ago, I stood in front of the people at Community. I taught from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. It says, you are a chosen people. You are a royal priesthood. You can show others the goodness of God. I love it. It's not like the staff, the pastors. No, you. 3 times it says it. And we taught about the priesthood of all believers. Now in Chicago, where you have 70% of the people there have probably a Catholic memory, when you look at them and you go, hey, you're a priest, it kind of wigs them out a little bit, right? That's what we said, no, you're a priest. And we went on and said, and as a priest, there's a particular people or there's a particular place that God has called you to. And if you believe that today, what we're going to ask you to do, we did something kind of old-fashioned. We said, we want you to come forward and we want to anoint you, and we want this to be your ordination in the ministry. And we also want to say, you know what, if you don't get this, you're not sure about it, you don't mean it, don't do it. Okay? Do not do this, because it'll lessen it for everybody else. And we had a couple thousand people that came forward and said, yeah, I wanted to be ordained. And as they came forward, what we did is we anointed them, and we said, okay, what's the people, what's the place, who are you called to impact? And people would say things like, I think I'm supposed to reach the people in my apartment community. And we'd anoint them and say, okay, you go. I'm thinking I'm supposed to work with the kids in this under-resourced neighborhood, and we'd anoint them and say, okay, you go. I'm supposed to start a Bible study in my workplace, and we'd anoint them and say, okay, you go. And I'll tell you, it was amazing, but whatever you do, and it may need that kind of a symbolic, kind of almost motivational, because then you got to start putting some legs on this thing, but do something like that makes it very clear, okay, that when people are baptized, they're baptized in the ministry, and you are ordaining them. How do you foster this kind of apostolic environment? I would say here's the second thing. I would encourage you to do this. Lead with a yes. Okay? Lead with a yes. Ask how later on. A lot of our churches, when they were put together with kind of a model that's kind of based around how businesses work, where you have a target person, right? You have a particular target person, that's our target person, and all of our programs are to reach that particular target person. And so, because of that, then we're trained to say no to everything else that doesn't go after that target person, right? No, because we've got to keep you focused. Movement thinking instead says, no, I lead with a yes and I ask how later on. We have to get to the place where when people are coming to us, we're saying, yes, I bless that, let's try it. We're comfortable with lots of mistakes. Kirsten Strand was a woman in our church. She was living the American dream, stay-at-home mom, married to a husband who made a 6+ figure salary, 2 kids, upscale suburb. In the middle of all that, she felt a severe kind of depression, totally unfulfilled. Matthew 25 got a hold of her. She came to us and said, you know what, I'd like to start serving and maybe do a ministry in this under-resourced neighborhood, which is right next to where we'd first planted. Completely different kind of neighborhood for us. That was about 6 years ago. Since that time, her husband Scott left his corporate job, went back to school, is now teaching in that low-income school. They moved into East Aurora. Other people began to join her. And now Kirsten and a few friends, and anybody would listen, she's talking about community development and mission, and she's got our whole church engaged in this thing. And now every one of our locations, we have 10 locations, have a Community 412 representative. There are now 1,500 volunteers over there. She has a huge budget of a couple $100,000. She's partnered with 6 different elementary schools, a middle school, a high school. We run after-school programs, tutoring programs. My real gifts are probably more in leadership and evangelism, but hers are in compassion and justice. And when she came to our church, I mean, and brought this out, it just made us all, as we embrace this, made us all, our whole church, a lot more like Jesus. And it's been one of the, I'd say it's probably been the best thing that's happened to us in the last 7 years. What's really cool, the last campus we just started, our 10th campus that we just started, was in East Aurora. It's a bilingual campus. When most churches, you have a hard time planting a church because you want to go into a public school and you're trying to see if they'll let you meet there and they don't want you to meet there. You know what we had happen because of our partnerships? We had two different elementary public school principals, okay, come to us and say, hey, if you're going to start a campus, we would love to have you meet in our campus. Would you meet in our campus? Meet in our school? How about that? That was awesome. All right, let me give you something else. So you got to lead with a yes, okay? We got to develop a yes reflex to people. Yes, let's try it. Yes, let's try it. Yes, let's try it. Yes, let's try it. Don't be always saying no, all right? Here's a third thing you have to do. You need to teach people to go and not just bring. If we're going to develop these apostolic, we're going to teach them to go and not just bring. Donna's another lady in our church, loves bikes, specifically Harleys. That's her crowd. That's where she feels it most at home. A couple years ago, she came to us and said, you know what, would it be okay, because everybody rides on Sunday, would it be okay if I just skip church on Sunday and I start something to reach my biker friends? And she wasn't just trying to get out of church. She meant it, okay? And she didn't need our permission, but we gave it to her. And so now she goes these bike rides every Sunday. They all meet at this place called Elmer's Doghouse. Over the last year, she had about 100 different people that have ridden with her. And her goal is simply this. I'm trying to love these bikers, get them to love each other. And whenever she gets the opportunity, when they come together for these rides, she just asks, hey, what can I be praying about? What can we be praying about? And over the last year, this group of bikers, last 2 years, these group of bikers have now kind of formed almost really this difference-making kind of community. Some of their biker friends brought all their biker friends together. They had about 225 of them. They came together and did a ride to raise money for ovarian cancer. They raised $27,000. Last fall, they got ready to start the biking season again. She got 40 of her bikers together, and at our Montgomery campus, they actually had a biker blessing. And it sounds kind of cheesy, but I mean, you know what? Our campus pastor came out there, and it sounds, well, how do you bless a bike? No, he didn't really hold his hand on the bike and bless the bike. He actually went to each of those bikers and said, hey, how can I pray for you? How can I pray for you? He got a chance to pray for every one of them. Isn't that cool? She actually got to baptize for the first time, got to baptize one of those bikers. And one of those guys found their way back to God and became a Christ follower. Let me tell you another story. One more about Mark Dwyer. Mark's a guy, he noticed that churches don't always do a great job of reaching men. You know who does a brilliant job of reaching men? Golf courses. And Mark loved golf, all right? Mark loved golf. And he couldn't always, he had some success, but he couldn't always get guys to come to church with him. But he could always get them to go golfing with him. And so they'd go golfing when he'd talk about life, he'd talk about his faith, talk about family, those kind of things. Pretty soon he got other guys to go too. Pretty soon what he did, he had so many guys going, he worked a deal with one of our local golf courses. He got all the early morning tee times at one of our golf courses locally. Got all his friends to go golfing. They got to go golf at a discounted price. Then he got smart and he got a corporation to sponsor. He had a corporate sponsor for this thing. Last year he had more than 250 guys that went golfing. He calls it and sometimes you have to tolerate cheesy names. He calls it the Divine Back Nine. Sorry. But it's an awesome thing. And the next thing, I was just talking to him, he's got the members-only lounge, and so after they go golf in the morning, they're all going up to the members-only lounge and hanging out. He's doing some kind of different kind of workshops and that kind of things, but also doing Bible studies with these guys. That leads this fourth thing here. Fourth one, I'll give you. Plant the gospel before you start planting churches. I mean, what's good news to guys? Good news to guys is sports, right? I mean, that's what a missionary thinks like. What's good news? Sports. And so what missional teams will do is they'll think gospel planning before church planning, and they'll start with what's good news. Let me give you one more. Last one, fifth thing. Fifth thing, if you want to foster these apostolic environments. Missional teams have to be both, and I'll intentionally be redundant, incarnational and apostolic. I want to hit this hard, okay? And when I say apostolic, I'm talking about kind of what Alan talks about, that deepening and sending, that deepening and sending. There has to be reproduction in this thing. Kirsten Strand, I told you about her, went to East Aurora, moved her whole family there, doing awesome stuff and bringing transformation to that under-resourced neighborhood. If she goes there and doesn't bring an apprentice along with her, it's one and done, right? But she was smart enough, she brought alongside her this guy named Bob Lowe, and Bob now is doing the exact same thing as he trained under her in another community called East Joliet. And now they have apprentices. Mark, the guy I told you about the Divine Back Nine, he started with one golf course. Guess what now? This year now he's got a second one and a third one. If we think only incarnational, we're one and done. But if we're trying to, and there'll be no movement. But if we think incarnational and apostolic, if we think incarnational and reproductive, then there'll be movement. And movement is how we accomplish the mission. All right? Thanks a lot.